If you're considering getting into Fujifilm world and choosing your first lens to go with a new body, look no further. This is the best lens to start your collection. In today's video, I'll tell you why. With the 23mm lens on a crop sensor, you can get done anything you want. You can play with all genres and all kinds of photography. I think it is the most versatile focal length you can get for your Fuji. And this lens is ticking all the boxes of good 23mm lens. Let me introduce you Fujinon 23mm 1.4 VR LM. This is an updated version of one of the oldest Fujifilm primes. Original 23mm 1.4 was released 9 years ago. It's an interesting lens, but lacks sharpness, especially in corners, has an outdated focusing motors and no weather sealing. Unacceptable treats for a native $900 lens these days. 23mm 1.4 LM is a complete redesign. The most tangible lens design improvement is an aperture ring with much more pronounced clicks and lock in A mode. And of course a weather sealing. You also get a more modern, sleek look and feel. This new aesthetics is a step away from retro design. It changes the overall impression of your kit. With 23mm LM you lose big part of this old film camera aesthetics, but get a lot of improvements in all practical fields. One of the reasons 23mm is the best first lens for an APS-C camera is the size. Go wider and you will have to add optics to compensate for distortion. And to go further you need a lot of thick glass. But for normal lens like 23mm you don't need too much. You can design this kind of lenses to be very small and lightweight, but at the steep cost of image quality. You can also make them absolutely huge and heavy, but optically perfect. This 23mm is not too big, not too small, just right for me. Lens became a little harder and heavier than the older version, but I'm happy to carry additional weight to get a much sharper result. And still it's pretty lightweight, just 375 grams, less than a pound. It feels balanced on most Fuji bodies. The overall package is not pocketable in any sense, but manageable. With a focal length like this, you can get yourself right into the action and capture it close and personal. Your photos will make the viewer feel like they're a part of the action. But to do so, you need exceptional autofocusing capabilities. And this lens has them. How you can get from the name, it has linear focusing motors. Huge improvement from the original 23mm in terms of speed, noise and precision of autofocus. New 23mm lens takes no time to focus, works flawlessly with tracking modes on newer cameras and do a great job when shooting video. You may use your 23mm prime for landscape shots and architecture, but to do so it has to be sharp across the frame and perform well when stopped down, like this 23mm LM. All thanks to a new, much more sophisticated optical scheme. 23mm LM has 15 elements in 10 groups. Together they provide you with an impressive sharpness on all apertures. Even at 1.4, center of the frame is razor blade sharp. To get even sharpness across the frame, you have to close it down a little. But in center it's hard to see any improvements on Fuji's with 26 megapixel sensors. To see bump in sharpness after f2, you have to pair this lens with X-T5 or X-H2 with 40 megapixel sensor. Modern coating helps a lot too. Fuji 23mm LM is not afraid of backlighting. It is harder to get into situations where you lose contrast or get ugly flares like you used to get on old 23mm. 23mm is a nice focal length to take pictures of people too. You can do headshots obviously, but amazing environmental photos easy. It won't distort people's faces, will get you a blurry background and provide some environmental context in the frame. You don't have to stay at 1.4 to get smooth autofocus areas on this lens. 9-bladed aperture produce nice and creamy bokeh at any aperture. I especially like it rendering when shooting close-ups. Minimal focus distance is one of the strongest sides of this lens, just 90 cm, 7.5 inches. Such close focus distance paired with pretty wide angle gives you a lot of opportunities for uncommon shots. The only obvious optical flaws of this lens are vignetting and distortion. It's a very common compromise on modern lenses. After I saw uncorrected distortion on Panasonic 50mm 1.2, it doesn't surprise me. It is a good deal because usually you won't see it unless you shoot RAW and disable automatic profiles in your editor. In specs, an video camera will apply a profile that corrects those things on the fly. It takes minimal resources from camera and have almost no negative effects. RAW editors also use lens profiles and correct for everything by default. High sharpness and lack of obvious optical flaws give this lens a very clean and clinical look. Very modern, but there is nothing you can call a character. This is what most people expect these days from native expensive prime lenses. But if you believe that there is no school like an old school, this lens may disappoint you. But if you need results, this lens is an amazing choice, one of the best lenses in Fuji current lineup. And if you plan to add more lenses to your collection, I can argue that it's the best pick for your first one. 18mm and 33mm lamp primes are amazing, but they are too much and not enough. 18mm is too wide but not enough for really wide angle stuff. I would rather prefer a wider and much cheaper 13mm Viltrex as my dedicated wide angle lens. And there is no reason to have both. 33mm is too narrow for a lot of situations, but not enough to be a portrait lens. It's a great lens to have if you want only one lens and that's it. But if you are open to adding more lenses to your collection, you will want to get 56mm prime or a new 75 from Viltrex or something like that. And 23mm will be a great staple, great foundation of your collection. 23mm is not too wide, not too narrow, not too heavy, not too small, just right for me.